Well, here we are. 3 days after the end of the closed beta, and I miss it already. I didn't get to play it nearly as much as I wanted, due to work, personal obligations, and other boring, mundane stuff. So a lot of my time post-beta has been spent wishing I could have gotten one more level, built one more fob, or unlocked one more weapon. Adulthood seems really overrated. September 10th isn't all that far away in reality, but wow. It seems like an eternity when I know what fun awaits in the full release of WARDOGS. I started out just like I wanted to, attempting to fly helis. I started with a little bird, flying logistics. It was rough going, if I'm being honest. I'm willing to bet the majority of my teammates assumed I was drunk, but I actually managed to deliver a handful of supplies before I started getting repeatedly swatted out of the sky by SAM launchers. Unfortunately, due to some borked OBS settings, my video got corrupted, so the footage of my maiden flights will eternally rest in the wreckage of my helicopter. After that, I decided to cut my rather massive losses and try my hand at infantry. Again, I went into it with an open mind, not expecting to be a fragging god, just trying to hold my own and support my team with the limited weapon choices I had that early in the playtest. I decided to bring in a pair of binoculars, supporting my team with enemy spots to help our infantry advance. I barely used them during the first playtest, so this time I decided to give them a proper shot. And I was surprised by how quickly I started racking up the XP. After tagging enemies hiding in the hillsides, I'd get decent chunks of XP and cash whenever my teammates took down the tangos I had flushed out. More importantly, it actually felt like I was helping our infantry advance without necessarily having to be the guy doing all the shooting. If you plan on playing WARDOGS on release, I'd definitely recommend packing binoculars into your specialist slot early on. They're incredibly easy to use and seem like a cheap, low-risk way of generating cash and advancing levels early in your progression. Of course, after I had my fill of infantry, I went straight back to what I do best, building bases. I made sure to unlock the large hammer as quickly as possible during this test and immediately got to work building some solid fobs. This time I started experimenting with Bremer walls. Big, towering hunks of concrete that are much more robust than the Hesco walls I was used to building. There was a bit of a learning curve when it came to properly placing these bad boys, especially when trying to get them to meet up cleanly with the existing terrain. My fob wasn't going to win any beauty contests, but it seemed to do the trick in keeping enemy infantry out. And apparently, the artillery trucks remembered me too. As I was putting the finishing touches down, we started taking heavy fire from what seemed like multiple artillery vehicles. Our walls and gates got battered, and with nobody regularly running logistics, the reality of having an impenetrable fortress was rapidly slipping away. With our team score embarrassingly low and our would-be base of operations in tatters, I abandoned my aspirations of being a wartime architect and headed back to the front lines. This time I took on a role I hadn't got to use much, especially during the previous playtest, Recon. Recon has a pretty tough barrier to entry in WARDOGS. Along with the previously mentioned binoculars, one of the main ways of earning Recon XP early on is using the only rifle available to you at the start, the Scout Rifle TD. This thing has already earned itself a wonderful reputation online as a pellet gun. It's a break-action 5.56 that fires a whopping 46 rounds per minute and hits for a paltry 28 damage. Against even a basic helmet, you're looking at 2 headshots to put somebody down. No small feat when your rifle rechambers about as fast as a Civil War musket. Nonetheless, with my pea shooter in hand, I actually managed to hold my own. In fact, I ended up with a better score than most of the times I rocked an assault rifle. I held down the second floor of a house, flanked by my teammates, and basically became the counter sniper for our push, harassing and popping the enemy sharpshooters who were trying to halt our advance. Eventually I moved up with the team, hanging towards the back line as we pushed over the top of a hillside and encountered some pretty heavy resistance. And somehow, despite carrying a rifle that felt like it should have come with an orange tip on the barrel, it worked. Eventually, my streak came to an end, and I was forced back to our home base with the enemy team only a handful of points away from victory. Better luck next time. Although I did have a blast during this playtest, it definitely wasn't perfect. For starters, for the first day or so, none of the voice channels worked due to an issue with a third-party voice provider. And I didn't realize just how important proximity and squad chat were to WARDOGS until they were gone. The first playtest was full of random conversations, callouts, supply requests, and people coordinating on the fly. Voice communication was a huge part of what created the sense of fun and community, and without it, everything had to funnel through text chat, which, as far as I could tell, nobody really read anyway. I had multiple games where I didn't hear a single voice or see more than a couple random messages, and WARDOGS suddenly became a much more isolated experience. I'm sure that once the technical difficulty started, most organized groups simply migrated to Discord and probably stayed there for the remainder of the playtest. But for solo players like me, it almost felt like I was playing WARDOGS on single player mode, and that's a huge detraction from the experience. Along with the artillery trucks, the accessibility of everyone to the team's mobile spawn point once again created some headaches during the weekend. I still can't tell whether it was trolling or just lack of knowledge, but all too often our APC was being used like a frontline assault vehicle, constantly driven directly into the zone and occasionally used as a battering ram against enemy infantry. Bear in mind, the vehicle needs to be stopped for anyone to actually use it as a spawn point. So whether knowingly or not, somebody driving the APC around like it's an attack vehicle essentially prevents it from being used for its intended purpose. And when the driver finally did stop, it was usually in the middle of a hot zone, surrounded by no less than a dozen enemy infantry, leaving whatever poor sucker spawned inside to walk directly into a firing squad the second they exited the vehicle. Of course, telling the driver in proximity chat that they needed to put the mobile spawn somewhere safe, preferably inside a fob, would have been ideal, but for obvious reasons, that wasn't exactly in the cards. I spent a large portion of the weekend wishing I had an organized group to play with, which brings me to a pretty important point about WARDOGS. If you're planning on playing entirely as a solo player, something that's very doable in other games of the genre, WARDOGS might occasionally leave you wishing for more. It is, without a doubt, a social, team-based experience at its core. You can run around by yourself, you can grab a rifle, rack up kills, drive vehicles, build things, or do whatever else you feel like doing. But I'm starting to realize the mechanics themselves aren't necessarily what made me fall in love with WARDOGS. It was the people using them together. It was random teammates helping me build a fortress. It was somebody calling out enemy positions while I dropped mortars on them from half a kilometer away. It was logistics players showing up with supplies right when we desperately needed them. It was hearing some random dude walk past my construction project and telling me, "You're doing great work, son." And weirdly enough, it took having most of that communication disappear for a weekend to make me realize just how important it was. WARDOGS is mechanically fun by yourself, but when you're actually part of a team, that's when it becomes something special. And despite everything I've complained about here, the artillery trucks, the broken voice chat, people stealing the APC, and a sniper rifle with roughly the stopping power of an aggressive Nerf gun, 3 days after the servers went down, none of that is really what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about everything I didn't get to do. One more level. One more weapon. One more fob. One more ridiculous attempt at flying a helicopter without killing everyone involved. And more than anything, one more match. September 10th cannot get here soon enough. And don't worry guys, I've seen a lot of comments from you guys asking if I have a Discord for all of us dad gamers. You can guarantee before WARDOGS drops, I'll have one ready to go by release day. I hope to see all you guys in there once I get it up and running. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Once again, I am Skunk Monkey, and I will catch all of you guys on the next one. Peace.